Dawn on Kryn Prime never arrived gently. It came like a blade drawn across the canyon's throat-cold light spilling over jagged rock, turning fog into sheets of pale gold, waking the river with a dull, metallic shimmer. The water ran low this season, and where it should have been clear over stones, it churned thick with silt the color of old wounds. Crimson mud clung to the bank in heavy folds, stamped by clawprints and the drag marks of something that had been hauled, unwilling. Across the ground, the hunting party found her there, a lone figure crouched near the river's edge, half swallowed by reed grass and mist, human-sized small, fragile-looking beside the sweeping boulders and the towering spires of black stone. She didn't turn when they fanned out around her. She didn't bolt, even though any sensible outsider would have run the moment 8 Kryn warriors emerged from the fog with spears leveled, breath huffing in harsh, animal bursts. Lyra Vale stayed crouched, hunched over something cradled to her chest. The lead hunter stepped forward, slow and deliberate, his weight shifting the mud with a wet, sucking sound. His translator unit strapped to his throat with a leather harness clicked. As it tried to predict the shape of his growl and turn it into language a human could understand. Step away from the cub, human. The words came out rough, the device unable to fully carry the threat in his voice. But the meaning didn't need perfect translation. It lived in the ring of spear points, in the stiff set of shoulders, in the way the hunter's nostril slits flared, tasting the air for blood. His name was Raketh. Lyra knew that much. Everyone on the borderlands knew Raketh of the Split Fang clan. Raketh who had driven off raiders from the southern ravines. Raketh who had killed 3th Corps swarm hunters in the last moon, cycle alone and worn their chitin plates as trophies. His claws were as long as Lyra's fingers, curved and polished, catching the dawn light as he gripped his spear. His eyes umber and narrow never left the bundle in her arms. Lyra didn't reach for the plasma cutter on her belt. She didn't raise her hands. Her gaze stayed fixed on the small body pressed against her chest, as if the rest of the universe had narrowed to that single, fragile weight. Her response, when it came, was barely a whisper. He's dying. The hunters shifted. Mud rippled beneath their feet. A low sound passed between them somewhere between a hiss and a rumble. The Kryn instinctive language of uncertainty and alarm. They weren't accustomed to hearing those words from a human's mouth, and certainly not spoken like grief instead of triumph. One of the younger hunters barked, voice sharp enough that even the translator stuttered. "You killed Tovik." The name fell like a stone. Tovik, Alpha's son, Den Village cub, 6 seasons old. Barely old enough to leave the safety of the burrows and practice hunts. His mother's scent would still be thick on his fur. His love high and chittering would still echo in the den holes. Another hunter stepped forward, spear point trembling with anger. "You killed an Alpha's son." "Ah, no." Lyra's voice cracked, and the sound startled them more than any shout might have. She finally looked up. Her eyes were flat-faced and human, pale in the fog, and the Kryn had always found human eyes unsettling to exposed, too expressive, too hard to read as predator or prey. But what they saw now stole the certainty from their bodies. tears. The human was leaking. Her cheeks were streaked with grime and wetness, and her lashes clumped together. Her mouth trembled as if she were holding herself upright by sheer stubbornness. "I found him like this," she said, each word careful, as if speaking too loudly might break something. "Razor wings. They were still feeding when I got there. I scared them off." She shifted just enough for the hunters to see the cub properly. Tovik's fur, normally a sleek, smoke-grey coat, was matted dark with blood. Deep gashes cross-hatched his torso, the kind of wounds made by serrated beaks and hooked talons. The air carried the sharp, bitter tang of venom. Razor wing venom. Everyone in the territory knew it. The predator birds nested high in the canyon. Walls, sleek bodies made for the wind, wings edged with bone spurs sharp enough to slice stone. Their venom didn't kill immediately. It seeped, slow and cruel, turning blood thick and heavy, drowning lungs from the inside. Victims didn't die fast. They died afraid. Tovik's eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow and wet. Each small inhale shuddered like it might be his last. He should have been home, safe in the Den village, practicing clawfalls and listening to elders tell stories of the first hunt. Instead, he lay in a human's arms, broken. Rakoth's spear lowered by an inch, then froze as if he'd caught himself. His voice came out harsher than he intended. Lies. But the word didn't carry the same conviction it would have minutes before. Humans were known across the galaxy for many things: persistence, stubborn courage, pack-bonding instincts that bordered on the irrational, and a disturbing ability to survive in environments that should have stripped the life from their lungs. Humans colonized deserts, ice worlds, toxic moons. They adapted, they endured. But they weren't known for killing cubs. Not like this. Even the coarse swarm, the Kryn's oldest enemy, didn't stoop to hunting the young. The swarm devoured warriors and left dens alone. There were rules, even among monsters. Lyra swallowed. Her throat worked as if the words hurt to push out. "Look at my hands." She lifted one palm slowly, careful not to jostle the cub. Her other arm stayed beneath Tovik's head, cradling him with a tenderness that didn't fit the hunter's image of a trespasser. Her fingers were torn, nails split, knuckles raw. Blood slicked her skin in thin lines that weren't Kryn blood, defensive wounds. The distinct puncture marks of razor wing beaks. "I fought them off," she said. "They kept coming back." One of them tried to go for his throat. I couldn't let them." The hunters stared, nostril slits flaring again. The scent confirmed it. Human blood, sharp and iron-rich, mixed with Kryn blood, young blood, frightened blood, poisoned blood. Lyra's voice went softer, almost pleading. "I've been carrying him for 3 hours, trying to get back to your settlement." That made the circle tighten in a different way. Several heads turned, quick glances exchanged, because the Kryn settlement lay to the east, past the broken ridge and the thorn grass flats. The human settlement lay west, opposite directions. They all knew it. Rakoth's gaze flicked over her, measuring. "Why?" Lyra's answer came without hesitation, as if she'd been repeating it inside her skull for miles. "Because he's a child." The last word broke. Her breath hitched. and for a heartbeat she looked like she might fold in on herself. But she held, shoulders rigid, as if her body had decided collapse was a luxury she wasn't allowed. Because, when I found him, she continued, he looked at me, and he was scared. He didn't understand why he was hurting. He kept calling for his mother. The translator didn't catch every nuance, but grief needed no translation. The hunters had seen it in each other, heard it in the keening cries that rose from dens. When a hunt went wrong, when a cub didn't return, when an elder's breath finally stopped, this grief was the same. This human was mourning a Kryn cub she'd never met. One of the older hunters, his muzzle scarred from past battles, stepped closer. His spear didn't lower, but his voice softened. The venom is already in his blood. He said quietly, "Razor wing venom. Even if we ran back now." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. A cub poisoned like this was dead. He simply hadn't stopped breathing yet. Lyra nodded, slow. Her eyes stayed on Tovik's face. Her thumb brushed his fur near his jaw, a motion so gentle it looked like prayer. "I know," she whispered. "I know, little one." Tovik's eyes fluttered, as if the sound reached him from far away. For a moment his gaze focused, dim confusion, sharpening just enough to land on Lyra's face. His mouth opened slightly. A wet, rattling sound came out, half breath, half cry. The translator unit on Raketh's throat crackled, as if trying to interpret it. But there were no words, only the small, desperate insistence of a dying child. Lyra leaned closer. What happened next would be retold in Kryn denholds for generations. Lyra Vale, the human who had lived among the Kryn for 2 years, always useful, always tolerated, always kept at arm's length, bent her head and pressed her lips to Tovik's forehead. A kiss, human custom, affection, comfort, goodbye. The hunters stiffened. Some bristled, nostril slits snapping wider in instinctive shock. Humans touched with their mouths. Humans exchanged breath. To a Kryn, it was intimate in a way claws and teeth were not. But Lyra didn't hesitate. She held the kiss for a long moment, eyes squeezed shut. Tears slid down her face and disappeared into the cub's fur. Her shoulders shook once, hard, and then softly she began to hum. No words, just a sound that rose and fell, weaving a pattern older than language. It carried the shape of a cradle rock, the weight of night air, the promise that someone was there, a lullaby. None of the hunters knew the word, but they felt the effect. Tovik's breathing slowed. The frantic tremor in his chest eased into longer, gentler rises, his claws tiny, still rounded at the tips with youth unclenched from Lyra's sleeve. The fear drained from his eyes, and then, as if he'd finally been given permission, he was gone. For a heartbeat the world held its breath with him. Then the sound that came from Lyra's throat shattered the dawn. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a sob. It was a keening roar, animal, vast. A morning call so deep it vibrated against canyon walls and came back. As echoes, layered on itself like a choir of ghosts, Lyra rocked back and forth in the mud, clutching Tovik's small body to her chest, as if she could hold him in place through force of love alone. Her grief poured out without shame, without restraint, without any attempt to make it palatable for those watching. The hunters froze. They had never heard a human sound like that, but they had heard it from Kryn mothers, from fathers, from warriors who returned carrying too little weight. It was the same. One by one, spear points dipped. Raketh was the first. His weapon slipped from his claws and thudded into the mud, upright for a moment before sinking. Then another spear dropped, and another, until 8 spears lay abandoned. In crimson earth, and 8 hunters stood with their heads bowed. In Kryn culture there were protocols for death rites and rituals, cleansing with river water, the lighting of scent stones, the recitation of the cub's first hunt accomplishments, even if they were small. There were formal words for a life, ending too early. But there was also something older than protocol, older than civilization. The recognition of shared grief. The instinctive understanding of a warrior who had truly tried, and failed to save the young. Lyra Vale was not an alpha. She was not clan-born. She was not even Kryn. But in that moment she became something they understood. She became pack. Raketh approached slowly, claws retracting into his fingers to show he came without threat. His boots sank deep into mud as he knelt beside her, the movement careful, reverent. His voice came low, translator murmuring the words gently this time. "Give him to me," he said. "I will carry him home to his mother." Lyra's rocking slowed. Her grip tightened once, as if her body refused to let go of what it could no longer protect. Then she looked up at Raketh. Her eyes were red, swollen, rimmed with grit. A strand of hair stuck to her cheek. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't save him." Raketh's gaze didn't harden. It softened in a way few had ever seen from him. "You gave him comfort in his last moments." He replied, "You fought the razor wings. You carried him for hours. Knowing he would die, you sang him into the next hunt." He reached out and placed one massive paw on her shoulder, heavy, warm, grounding. A gesture that, among Kryn, meant more than sympathy. It meant recognition. "In my clan," Raketh said, "this makes you den mother." The translator hesitated, then chose the closest human word. It still didn't capture the fullness, the one who holds the young, who stands between cub and harm, who grieves as if bloodbound. Raketh continued, voice deeper. "In all the clans, this makes you Kryn friend." A low rumble rose from the other hunters' agreement. Respect. It rolled through the fog like distant thunder. Lyra's breath shuddered. She looked down at Tovik one last time. Her fingers smoothed the fur at his brow, wiping away mud as if she could return him to clean. Then, carefully, reverently, she placed him into Raketh's arms. The cub's body looked impossibly small against the hunter's broad chest. Raketh held him as if he weighed something sacred. Lyra pushed herself upright. Her legs shook. Mud clung to her clothes, blood dried dark on her sleeves. Tears cut fresh tracks through grime. She swayed once, catching herself with sheer stubbornness. "I want to come with you," she said. Her voice was hoarse now, scraped raw by grief. "To the settlement. I need to tell his mother I tried." Raketh nodded. "She will want to meet the human who held her son as he died," he said, "who gave him peace." He added something in his own language, soft, untranslatable. A phrase meant for dens and morning fires. Without the translator, Lyra didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. It was not permission. It was welcome. Lyra wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mud and salt across her skin. And then, without being told where to stand, she fell into step beside the hunting party. No one bound her hands. No spear point hovered at her ribs. Raketh carried Tovik at the center, and the others formed a loose ring around them, not a cage, but a shield. Behind them, the sun rose fully over the canyon, painting rock and river and blood-slick mud with a sudden flare of gold. 8 spears lay abandoned in the crimson earth, and a human walked surrounded by Kryn warriors, not as a prisoner, but as one of the pack. By nightfall, the story would already be spreading. It would pass from hunter to elder, from elder to den mother, from den mother to cubs wide-eyed around firelight. It would travel between villages along scent trails and drum signals, carried in the rhythm of paws on stone and the hush that always followed true war. The human who kissed a dying cub's forehead, the human who made alphas drop their spears, the human who proved that some things, love, grief, the instinct to comfort the dying, transcended species, transcended worlds, transcended everything except the simple recognition of shared suffering and shared care. Lyra Vale had come to. Kryn Prime as an explorer, a researcher, an outsider. She would leave as something far more important. She would leave as family.